Well, hello. I'm gonna try and fix this. There we are. Okay, and like this, so I can see your comments. Just reminding you, if you're watching from YouTube, in order to post comments, you need to have subscribed to the channel. We're doing that because we want to track if some comments are not appropriate or anything like that. Then we're able to find corrective measures. Okay, as we always say, if you are curious, you have questions, and you're watching this and it's not live, it's not an issue. You can simply write a message and I will get back to you. I always review the comments after they are posted. So it's always a pleasure. I'm trying to post the reading list, and I guess I can't. So I'll do this now because some of you always have questions. So those will be in the comments on YouTube. If you want them on Facebook, you just let me know. I can post them. I can always post them. We're just going to wait to see if anybody else is going to be joining us. And we're going to be starting in a minute. If during the transmission, things freeze, just know that the replays are never frozen. It just freezes because it's live, but the replays are always fine. So if you're missing something, you can join us that way. And the other thing is, the podcasts are always usually without fail because those are not broadcasted live. So we know that there's no glitches there. So if you want to review it again, then that'll be good. Okay, so I get people everywhere sign up. Remember, you can post comments. As I see the questions, I will answer as I go. Okay, perfect. Let's start. So welcome to tonight's podcast on the Sacred Mystery School of the Greeks, part 6 of the Shamanism across the world. Someone brought up the question of what's the difference between why are we doing the mystery school? We're doing mystery school because the mystery school are based on shamanism. Now, because of society, and you'll see particularly because of the way society evolved and we became more sedentary in bigger regions like of Europe and Greece and Egypt and all these places, you can just keep moving around because then you kept bouncing into people and other what do you call it? Other colonies or other groups or tribes or whatever. So eventually people couldn't just move around like they were before. So they started settling. And when you do that, it kind of goes against the whole idea of shamanism. Shamanism is more of a tribal, nomadic kind of way of living. And we're going to understand that more with the Greeks today because it's easier to track with the Greeks. They had writing. So whereas others like the Toltecs had writing, but it's pictograms, it's more images, it's more like hieroglyphics for the Egyptians, it leads to a certain implication that you are putting words or meaning to this image. Now, last week when we talked about archaeologists, the archaeologists, someone says, well, when they see the big towers and they're going to say, oh, that was one community living all together. And that's not the case, right? We know better. We don't know our neighbors. So to say that we lived in this great community would not have been true. So we're trying to interpret things with what we know. And so when it comes down to interpreting symbols, to giving meaning to certain things, we're giving meaning to those things based on what our frame of reference is. This becomes really important with the Greeks because the pantheon for the Greeks and the Romans is shared, right? So I have a book here and I put this in my book, so give me a second. For example, we're going to be talking about Hercules. Well, Hercules, as also the name Heracles with the Greeks. So Hercules was the Roman name for the same person. Now, what we're interested in is particularly the Greeks. Why the Greeks? Because the Romans, although they had a belief system based on the Greek pantheon, they perverted it. So it wasn't the whole spirituality behind the religion was lost completely when it hit the Romans. So it's important because today we'll talk about Dionysus. And Dionysus equivalent in the Roman world is Bacchus. And Bacchus is the god of wine and the god of orgies and the god of sexual liberty and so forth and so on. Technically, his equivalent is Dionysus, who was the god of beer. But that's just one thing. He taught the people how to cultivate the vine to make a drink. And you have to remember, water was not purified. So drinking water was often dangerous because if they didn't boil it first, it could have been full of contamination, as opposed to drinking a beer, which was fermented and you knew what you were drinking and there was no way that you could get sick out of it. So Dionysus associated with Apollo was about healing and finding remedies in nature. So it's a very, very far cry from the king of orgies and the king of wine. The difference being that it's all about moderation. And so you weren't supposed to drink until you lost your head and became this great party person. You were supposed to use things in moderation for, and that's the same to be said with any plants. Certain plants taking in too great of a dose, they become poisonous. So it's the same idea, right? It's a different kind of poison, but poison nonetheless. So we're really going to focus on the Greek myths more than the Romans. We're going to take the original Zeus, Hera, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Aphrodite, Hermes, Ares, Hephaestus, and Poseidon and Hades tonight, because we want the original, not dephased, not transformed characters of the Romans. We really want to go to the basic of it all. Again, why did I pick these several countries is one of the other questions I get offline. I picked those because they're the ones that have myths. They are the ones that have creations, myths, they have stories. And those stories are being retold and they outlasted thousands of years, not because they're interesting, but because they had meaning. And although we often lose the meaning behind it, like the Romans did, and then just becomes a bunch of stories and excuses to party, they had meaning, they had an importance, and that's where they kept being retold. So I picked the countries or the cultures that had something to go on to explain why do we advance what we're advancing. How can we say certain things? Well, it's based on the background that's been left behind. With the Greeks, it's easy because of their writings, because of their plays, because of their popularity, because of their influence. They influenced not just Greece, but they were influencing Italy, they were influencing Egypt, they were influencing the whole basin of the Mediterranean Sea. So they affected so many countries, so many cultures. And so with all of that, it was really interesting to be able to delve into them today. Now, a lot of the information that I've been sharing with you guys is that many of the Greeks, I've gone to Egypt to be part of the Egyptian mystery school. This would be the equivalent of saying that I could maybe have completed a bachelor in Canada, but I'm going to do my master's in the States and maybe get an opportunity to do my doctorate degree in Australia or England. It doesn't mean that the school was necessarily not a good one. It just means that the opportunity was there for studying. And these particular Greeks turned out to be the most elaborate philosophers, that Greece had. Pythagoras is one of them. So we're not talking about just Joe next door who decides to put on his backpack and just go somewhere else. And Greece and Egypt are not that far apart, right? So, um, and schooling back then was quite different. So you didn't pay the same way, and the costs were very different. So you could afford to, it wouldn't be much different to study in Greece than to study in Egypt. You just had to be worthy enough to study in those schools. So Pythagoras lived between 580 before Christ to 500. So he was about 80 when he passed away. And he spent 22 years of his life in the temples of Egypt as an initiate in ancient mysteries. He did that before establishing his own school of philosophy in southern Italy, even though he was Greek. So he's all over the place, yes? Pythagoras is known for the doctrines of numbers, for the heliocentric system of the universe, for music, for astrology, for astronomy, for mathematics, for geometry. So he was well versed in a variety of subjects. He was brilliant and elaborated a lot of theories. In order to study in the Pythagoras school, you had to be quiet for 5 years. So you weren't going to debate what was being said. You were going to sit down and listen. So 5 years in silence was the requirement to study there. So he put all this together after decades of studying. Now, Plato was also gone to the Egyptian mystery school, and he shares some of that knowledge in Gnosis. So he has different talks. There's the great dialogues of Plato. They're not easy to read, but there's multiple ones, right? So the great dialogues is the Republic, the Apology, Phaedo, and then there's also Timaeus, Critias, Menexus, Epistles. So he had elaborate talks that were written down that became sort of poems. But in Gnosis particularly, he speaks about how the soul can be accessed through the essence of all things, through the path of wisdom. Know that any students of any mystery school is not supposed to reveal the mysteries. They were afraid that if some of the knowledge fell into the wrong hand, it would lead to destruction. One of the person that defied that is Socrates, and the other person was Jesus. But they didn't thought the mystery the way they were taught, but they were trying through different means to get people to realize there was a lot more than just the physical world. They understood a lot, like the lady who speaks of the Huna principle to the world, and from Miguel Guru's sharing the Toltec mysteries outside of the Toltec people. They understand that there's really nothing behind it that can be used in a bad way. The knowledge that you can acquire, it can only bring harm if you're using that to then control people and manipulate people. I mean, but they'll do that anyway. So why not give a chance to everybody to choose, and to choose to save their own self by discovering their own divinity and opening up to this magnificent energy and this sense of belonging that we've lost. So what's surprising is that a lot of people suppose that the Greek mystery school, because of the many Greeks that attended the Egyptian mystery school, is just based on the Egyptians. It's not true. Long before the Greeks were there was a mystery school that came and was influenced by the Mycenaean. And that was 2,000 years before Jesus Christ. So if we compare Pythagoras, that was 500 that we're studying tonight or looking at tonight, is actually 1,500 years older than him. So perhaps what Pythagoras was curious about, just like I am, was to say, okay, so there's a mystery school in Greece, and he went there and he learned things, and it was fabulous, and he's enticed by all this, and he's like, I wonder if there's more to learn. And so he went to Egypt, and then he studied under them. And then he wanted to know, am I missing something? Is there more to learn? Is what can I bring back with me? So to say that the Greek mystery school was based on Egyptian, it's not true. Absolutely not. But is it very different than the Egyptian mystery school? Not much. But I find through all the research that I did that the Odin or the Norse mystery school, the Norse mystery school, the real name is the Odynic Mysteries, and compared to the Greeks are very, very, very similar. There's a lot of the same things. And we'll go over those tonight because we know that the Celts were funded through the history that you can read about the different invasions of Ireland, and consequently the colonization of Ireland was mostly based by a lot of Greeks coming back and forth and coming, being expelled, growing a little bit in Greece, coming back. And so that you want to or not, even though they have their own mythology, the basic would have been, their influence would have been massively Greek, which is why we've been talking about the Greek influence through almost all of the podcasts so far. And we're at number 6 now. So amongst the initiates in Greece, there was people such as Cicero, Plutarch, and Plutarch is one of the ones that's written down history. He's an important figure in historical data in keeping the information. Sophocles, also important guy. Pindar, Epictetus. So all of these philosophers were from the Egyptian mysteries, the Greek mystery school. They could publicly announce that they were initiates to the rites, but what the rites were and what the initiations were had to remain secret. So that's a little bit like when we're talking about, let's say, Reiki. When we talk about Reiki, you can say what we do. We're using energy to transmit to people or places or things, and we're getting this energy from Creator. And then when we talk about the initiation, we can say, well, yes, for each level there's initiation, and for the second and third level there's symbols, but I'm not allowed to reveal the symbols to you because the symbols are held sacred, not so much as a secret. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to say that they're symbols. This is the same thing. The Greeks understood that it's belonging to this mystery school is not an issue. You can tell everybody. You could even encourage people to join the mystery school because it was very, very important. They could see the importance of this knowledge. But unless you're a part of this school, then the intimate details were not to be revealed. Why is that? Why is that so important? Well, one of the reasons is you're being tested. And if you already know the answer, and you, instead of reacting to this test and instead of proving yourself, you just already know what's expected of you, then you will give the proper answer. But that doesn't mean that you will have necessarily understood the lesson behind it. In one of the temples in Egypt, the Sobek and Horus temple, the initiate had to walk down a well and then have to swim into this entrance that was really, really dark. And they had at the end a choice between a dark entrance and a lighted entrance. One led to sunshine, yes, but it was filled with crocodiles, and the other ones led to darkness, where you were initiated into the mysteries because you were not afraid to face your own darkness. But if you already told everybody, oh, don't pick this door, pick the other door, it's because the student is not ready to find the answer on their own. And what comes after the initiation is that you must do introspection. You must look within yourself. You must look into the darkest recess of who you are, what you've done, and understand what you've learned from this and the damage you might have caused. And so it requires a level of maturity. It requires a level of being able to think. And so the initiates that have passed those tests were able to understand all this. And so they know that it was not going to be advantageous for anyone to actually know how the process works. And that's why the process was held as a secret, so that the people going through the initiation would do so in an open faith, and face their own darkness, and be tested the same way everybody else was tested. Now, Socrates was invited to join the mystery school. But he's one of the great philosophers as well. But he was not to refuse to be initiated into it, because he knew that then he would not be able to speak of the principles that were being taught. And Socrates understood the principles without being a member. He understood the precept that you are created in the image of God, and God is energy, and so therefore so are we. He didn't need to go to a mystery school to understand that. And he wanted to talk about it. And so he didn't want to be gagged. And so by refusing to be initiated, he could say whatever he wanted. And this is important because other people said, well, we how can we get initiated then? You get initiated by the knowledge that I share with you, and then by doing the work that is encouraged of you through all of the podcasts, the suggested exercise, or examining your life. Socrates, it's beautiful that he refused to be initiated, because he proves the point. It's knowledge, and through this knowledge is the liberation that we are in a finite space, and we live and we die, and then we go there. In their case, for the Greeks, they go to Hades, they go to the underworld, and then that's it. You're stuck in the underworld. This is not a whole lot of fun, right? So what's the purpose of living then? Why have children if they're just going to live? They're going to suffer because of Pandora, who released all the misery into the world, and then we die and we go to Hades. Your life needs purpose. Your life needs to be more than just being born, toiling all your life, and then dying. However, if you come to the understanding that you are a soul, and inside this physical form, which is your temple, you have the soul, which is made of energy and light, and you can recognize this energy and this light. The second part of being part of the mystery school is that you recognize then, in essence, that every other human has the same soul and the same light inside of them. And so you start treating people differently. You start living your life differently, because you recognize that divinity is inside each of us. And then further along in your training, you obtain the information that this same light, this same energy is also in everything that is living. So in your dog, in your cats, in your cows, it's also in the trees and the plants. It's now everywhere. So the ultimate idea of the initiate is to understand that you are one with absolutely everything. So we need to treat the world with respect. We need to treat the plants and the planet with respect. All of the stories in the Greek myths are there to explain to us what is a proper behavior. It's kind of a school of teaching. So even to the people who are not even remotely interested in the initiations or the mysteries, they at least get a teaching of how to behave. It's very, very interesting, because in the Greek mysteries, all the women are courted. They do admit that rape does exist, but the gods are not doing that. The gods are far from perfect. They're jealous, they're vindictive, they're vengeful, and they cheat on their wives. So it's not a matter of perfection. In the research that I did, the reason for that is that it's easier to associate with a god that is not perfect, as opposed to trying to emulate something that is, that defies the purpose, because people are automatically discouraged by the fact that they could never be perfect. The other big lesson through the mystery school is that you are already perfect, because the soul is without any stains. The only problem is that being, as we enter into this world, we are stuck with our senses, with our distorting our comprehension of what's happening around us. Now, the school that we're going to review today is called Elysian, and it's so close to, because the world is an illusion, just a big play. Interestingly enough, who love plays? The Greeks just love their drama, their tragedy, and their histories. And the school of Elysia had a massive, massive theater that held thousands of people in it. They were trying through their plays to teach us it's the same as living your life. So, depending on what choices you make, the outcome will come to you. If you decide to be vindictive, it's not going to go well, but not for anyone, not just those towards who you are being vindictive. Now, one of the interesting stories of Hercules, as most of you know him, is his 12th task, right? We know that he had to conduct all these tasks because he killed somebody, and as a punishment, he became the slave to the king, and then the king gave him these tasks because Hera, the wife of Zeus, hates Hercules. Why? Because Hercules is the son of Zeus by another woman. So Hera is the most jealous person there is in the pantheon. And then some of us will say, well, rightly so, he keeps cheating on her. Very true. And so every time he cheats on her, he not just cheats on her, but he has children as well. So there's all these demigods running all over the planet, and Hera is trying to make all of them their life miserable. And so Hercules is hidden. Hercules is being punished. He's being persecuted, and Hera is the one giving the tasks to his older brother, to try and make Hercules fail. And the tasks are gigantic. But we know that every time we're looking at myths, we're not supposed to look at the myths as they are, but as their meaning. So if we take, for example, Apollo represents the sun. So every time Apollo does something, you have to remember it's the sun doing those things. So some of the goddesses and the gods, they're associated to the sun, to the moon, to the sky, to all of the water deities. Is there different aspects of water? So river, ocean, dew. So each and every one of them is representing different aspects of nature, which is what shamanism is about. And to make sense of these things, it was said a long time ago that indigenous people feared the thunder, so they make stories to explain it. But when you really understand the mystery behind the myths, you realize that they understood a lot more. But they're trying to explain something without science, without the benefit of what we know, and we can explain with science. So they try to explain things with imagery, with stories. In the 12th task of Hercules, or Heracles, he goes to Athens to be trained in the Elysian Mysteries school in order to enter the underworld and get Cerberus, the dog with 3 heads. So it's very clear that here it's in the myth, it says there comes a certain point, no matter how brave you are, no matter how strong you are, no matter how successful you are, eventually you will need to go, and to finalize your success, you will need to go to the Elysian mystery and learn about these tasks. So when we start our explanation, it's not so much the secret that is important. It's that it teaches you about life's mystery. And what's more mysterious than death, right? That's when we leave this physical envelope, we leave the play. So what happens after our play? Now, the actors in the Greek mysteries and dramas, they simply changed their clothes and they went home. So after we die, we finish this play, we're going home. What does home actually look like? Is home a very dark place? Is home a place where our soul just wanders helplessly, suffering and alone, or is it something else? And so that was the draw to attend these schools, to understand the mysteries of life. Now, the tasks that were entrusted to Hercules was a bit of information that tells you what is it that he's trying to accomplish. He didn't attain such power because he was physically strong. He was actually a man quite intelligent and an initiate of heavenly wisdom. When he's accomplishing these tasks, he's trying to shed a light on the philosophy of what's been hidden in the deep darkness. For example, the boar, he overcomes the incontinence of man. The incontinence, in the sense that incontinence means to be unable to withhold, right? And so, in fighting the boar, he overcomes gluttony, he overcomes excess, he overcomes envy, he overcomes greed. That's what he overcomes with the boar. With the Nemean lion, he at first he tries to kill the lion without doing his research, and the arrows bounces off because the Nemean's lion is skin is made of gold, and so no arrow can pierce through it. And so it represents the indiscriminate rush towards improper goals. And so he has to take a step back. He has to rethink this, and it's teachings, right? Now, for the bull is the representation of sexuality and power. So as he's feathering the bull, he's feathering the violent rises of his passion. So the lust. Now you're starting to see these are the same things I've been talking about for weeks. Even in the sacred feminine, this is what we're talking about. He banished the coordinates from the world in the shape of the stag. He's chasing a stag at one point, and he's chasing the stag, and he realizes that if he kills the stag, he'll anger the Aphrodite. No, not Aphrodite. Sorry, Athena, goddess of wisdom. So he can't kill the deer, but he does capture the deer, and he makes a deal with her. He says, it's my task. It doesn't say I have to kill it, but I have to capture it. Let me bring him over, and then I'll free him. And he manages to do that, and the king wants to have the deer, and he says, well, sure, if you can have it, if you come and get it. And the king, being very afraid of Hercules, kept hiding in his castle, kept avoiding going outside. And so when he does, he's too slow, and the deer gets away and returns back to the forest. One horrible task he has to do is to clean the stables that have immortal bulls in it, and there's over 1,000 of them. And the only way that can be done in a day is that he diverts a river to wash through the stables. What this is, the dung, is the foulness that is putrid inside of us. So anything like anger, treachery, that's the representation of it. Then he scatters birds, and the meaning of scattering the birds is that it's taking flight. It's the idea of giving hope. It's the idea of looking at problems from a different perspective. And the many-headed Hydra is like a dragon with several heads, and every time you cut a head, another one grows. And so the only way that he defeats it is by burning the neck after he cuts the head so the head can't not regrow. It's to stop pleasure for the sake of pleasure. So in a way, when we're talking about Dionysus, it's about moderation. It's about controlling your desires so that they don't overcome you and they just, imagine having 9 heads. How can you function? Sometimes having one is one too many. So all of these tasks were given to Hercules as a preparation to the final mysteries to go into sorry. I welcome comments, but sometimes the comments are so idiotic that they distract me, so I apologize. So these tasks are given to him in preparation for the greater mystery. So we know that from all the other schools, you have always 2 levels. To be able to work through the human nature and go through all of these governors or greeds, you have to beat those before you can enter the greater mystery. Now we're going to see the importance of that because the 2 schools were in 2 different locations. So for him to actually go to Athens for the 12 tasks mean that he's finally completed his initiation. So the 11 tasks, the 11 first tasks would be his progress through his initiation as the lesser mysteries. So the hero of the stories, just like the initiate, must vanquish all these monsters. And these monsters are what's ruling our life or ruining our lives. And so it's important for us to examine all of the distractions that are forming these monsters in our lives and preventing us, the divine self, from coming forward. Because if you're here only for your senses and gratification and pleasure, you are basically wasting away your time here. That's not what the soul came here to learn and came here to do. So the lesser mysteries were held in Agare in the month of February. The initiations were held every year for the lesser mystery. So everybody, you didn't have to wait too long. Every year you could go and be initiated into the mystery. The cult behind it was tied to nature, to rebirth, to agriculture. It's linked to Mother Earth and the different seasons. So very much associated to shamanism, right? So all of the nature, all of the gods are represented by skies and nature attributes. That's how they're described. When Plutarch describes it, he says that it's the most famous of the secret religious rites in ancient Greece. So it's easy to find the Elysian mysteries. There's documentation about it everywhere. So that's really, really easy to see. Now, what the actual... thank you, Mark. The different temples of the Elysian mysteries are always dedicated to Apollo. Apollo's mom was represented by the darkness, because Apollo is the sun, and he's the son of Zeus, the sky, and Mother, the darkness. And out of the mix of the 2 came the sun, Apollo. And everywhere there was a teaching of the Elysian mysteries, that it's the lesser or the greater mysteries. There's a temple dedicated to Apollo. So you'll find all over Greece many, many temples. This is important because all of these locations are different steps in learning the mysteries. Just like in Egypt, there are several temples dedicated all along the Niles. Well, all of these different temples are part of learning what you came to learn. So it's not like you could choose, oh, I'll go to the one next door. No, you actually had to go to all of them to, much like Hercules, to complete all the different tasks and grow and then be ready for the final one. The mysteries are based on, so again, when it comes to the name of the goddesses, um, it could be Persephone, it could be Demeter, it could be Ceres, it could be Demeter, it could be many names, but it's the story behind it that we're interested in. So it doesn't matter if you're taking it from the Greek side or the Roman side. What you want is the one that represents darkness. For some people, and this is also very important, when we're reading kanji in Japanese, they're saying, okay, so this could mean sky, it could mean wind, it could mean this, it could mean that, but put with this, this is what it means, right? So there's an interpretation in the stories. If they refer to darkness, then it will say in some cases, oh, it's Persephone because she's married to Hades and she lives in the underworld, so it couldn't be any darker than that for her. Some people say, no, it's her mother, it's Demeter, because of what she creates. It doesn't really matter who exactly it is. All we know is that the mother is represented by darkness. What is the feminine darkness means? If we go into the deeper meaning of this, the darkness, feminine especially, always represents the inner, the world inside. So your own subconscious, your the depth of your soul, and so what's hidden from the world. And so that's what darkness means. The lesser mysteries were explained that the process was to purify your soul inside your earthly body. Since you've been imprisoned by the material and physical nature of your body, you needed to purify this body. So there was a lot of purification process, not just by fasting and washing, but also of the cleaning of what's inside. The initiates had to undergo what one of the initiates says, oh, it's a dark journey, it's terrible, it's difficult. Well, yes, because you have to look at all your faults. You have to look at everything that's happened to you. In some cases, you have to look at the wrongs you've done, but you also sometimes have to examine the wrong that's been done to you. And if it's been particularly difficult or painful, then it's hard to look at that. In the activities that I'm doing online right now, every Friday with my group from all over the world, we're doing that. And they're, it's not all sunshine and rainbows and unicorns, because they're like, this was difficult to look at. And I get that. But in order to examine it so it doesn't hurt anymore, you need to pull it out. You need to put it in the light. You need to look at it, and then you need to understand it. Because once you understand it, you're no longer afraid of it. Because once you understand your life lesson that you had to learn from this, then you can leave it behind and you can move forward. So the lesser mysteries was that introspection, that search, that cleansing of the soul inside this human experience. So those who successfully passed this level, so in Hercules, as we say, after his 11th task, he was called a Mista. A Mista eventually becomes the words mystic. So someone that knows and is connected to the divine and receives information and is guided. Yes. Then they go to the higher mysteries. The higher mysteries, now the information differs from one place to the next because they're based on testimonies that were written at the time. And it says that you can't, if you're initiated, let's say you're initiated this year, you could be initiated until at least a whole year went by. However, the higher mysteries are not conducted more than every 5 years. So even if you were to join the lesser mysteries and pass the year before, there would at least be a waiting period that you would have to wait. And so if you missed your 5 year, then it was a long wait. The sanctuary was based in Eleusis in ancient Greece, hence the name of the school was the Elysian Mysteries. The initiates at that point in time, reaching the higher mysteries, was that the soul was seen as a spiritual nature of human. So you finally were detaching from I'm a human to I'm a spiritual divine being. What does that imply? It means that you have to have certain behaviors. You have to have a certain moral code, an ethical code that you need to follow, because now you realize, oh, when I'm doing this, I'm hurting you. I can't do that anymore. You become very aware of the implication of every one of your actions, but also your words and your thoughts. There's a higher responsibility. This is why not everybody made it to there. Everybody could be initiated into, releasing their human nature. But in order to pass the test and to finally become into the higher mysteries, the level of responsibilities, I'm sure, scared away a lot of people, because I'm seeing it in my teachings now. Some people are like, oh, you know what? No, that's too much responsibility. I'm just going to live with my shutters on and I'm just going to ignore this. I'm going to pretend I don't know this because this is too much. Some people ask me, isn't that too much for you to be connected to everyone, to feel the pain of everyone? And I'm not constantly connected to it. But when I'm faced with certain situation, I feel it. Yes, and I acknowledge it. And then I ask myself, okay, as a person, what can I do? What is the power that I have to affect the situation, to change the situation, or to bring a change about? So I remember one in particular, they massacred a bunch of dolphins in Wales, and it was terrible. And the sea was red with blood. And so then I asked myself, okay, what can I do? Bring awareness about it, bring awareness that dolphins are sentient beings. I'll do what I can with the tools that I have. And then I can't beat myself up more than that, because that would be completely useless. And then I become, it becomes a waste of my time, right? So you always have to revert back to what is my power, what is my ability, what are my talents, and what's my circle of influence, and how can I change the community around me or the world around me to make it a better place, taking into consideration your power as a spiritual being, aware, conscious being on this planet right now. The true home for the soul is always in a higher world, in a higher frequency. That's where that's why, for the Greeks it's Mount Olympus, and for Odin it was Asgard. Asgard is on the top of a mountain. You had to be reached through the rainbow. You were eye her up. It's not so much because Mount Olympus actually existed in Greece. So it's not so much mounting the mountain or climbing the mountain. It's more about raising your vibration to be in a higher sphere of existence or vibration. That was all included in the higher mysteries. The greater of the mysteries was finding this balance is hard, yes, and that's why when we go into the exercise, we go into the meditation, and I teach classes about those things. I can't do everything on here. The best I can do is pique your interest, make you curious to want to learn more, and then you can always contact me and ask me if there's other books I could recommend, or if there's any activities that I would suggest. We're working right now on building workbooks, so that after doing these podcasts, then you can actually have a workbook and do the exercise and be more guided into your journey of this growth that we're all hoping to help you achieve. So just stay put. This is coming. It's our project. We were hoping to get that done this year, but we accomplished quite a bit this year. But there's just 24 hours a day. It doesn't seem to be enough for me to be able to accomplish all the projects. So they're not necessarily on hold. They're just, as we're completing them, we're publishing them. And the best place to find all of those is either to join the newsletter or to check on the website. Yeah, they're coming soon, so that's not an issue. Yeah. Okay, so continuing. The greater mysteries, even in the Illusion Mystery School, was also described. That's as much as you can get. 3 days and 2 nights. And much like the initiation in the pyramid, and also the resurrection of Jesus, that 3 days and the 2 nights is a key to shedding away all your corporeal leftovers, and then becoming into a light body. So the ceremony would elevate the mystic to a new level, and he was recognized as an epote, and that's the name they were giving themselves. Now, remember, with the Greeks, the Celtics have the bards, and they have the druids, and they always have these different names. The name is that important? No, just recognize that there's different levels, right? And that's how they recognize themselves outside of the school. The higher mystery revelation was that we can rejuvenate our spirit through the most and simple direct methods. And those methods for you, Mark, that you know, is the virtues. Practicing the virtues is one of the best ways to be able to align yourself to a higher vibration. The virtues are generosity, love, forgiveness, compassions. Those are the virtues that if you abide by those, then you will be on the right path. This again requires yourself to ask. I recommend to my student that they meditate every morning to prepare themselves for the day. And then at night, I tell them again, okay, so now take a time before you're going to sleep. Ask yourself, what's happened today? Who did I meet? Did I greet everybody? Was I kind to everybody? Could I have done better? How can you change if you never ask yourself those questions? That's also part of one of the ways that you can really improve yourself, is you need to be able to ask yourself, was that the best I could do? Could I have done better? Whatever it is that we do, we always have to ask ourselves those questions. Sometimes our day is simple and you're like, oh, well, today nothing happened. And yet, today, you went to the mail, you saw someone there. Did you look them in the eye? Did you smile? What did you do? And so the principle of that spiritual regeneration is based on that. The Elysian Mysteries rites, the details of it is, that was, although the most popular one, the most secretive one, which is really interesting, right? But we know that they were traveling through the 9 spheres, and a labyrinth was involved, and that the soul traveled to be incarnated in the flesh, meaning the senses, meaning all the temptations and all of that. And so you had to travel back out of that. And that's where there's 2 doors to the Elysian Mystery School. You enter the darkness. That's you being born. That's the fall of man. That's the soul being embedded in this body. And then as it's embedded in this body, it's being tempted and all these things. And then we're releasing all these attachment, these temptations, and we cross the other door into the light. So that's your travel through the Lesser Mystery School right there. And like the Odynic Mystery, there's 9 spheres. And we remember from last week, there was 9 worlds. This is where you get your clues as to what takes place, what happens, right? There's labyrinths everywhere in the Greek myths. There's a part of that means walking in the darkness, walking without knowing which direction to go, having to follow your intuition and your guidance and your knowledge and be wise. Perseus gets out of the labyrinth because there's a string, and then he can see, oh, I went there already, so I'm not going to go there. And that's how he's able to finally eventually get out, because he has something to guide him. In the same way, those guidance principle is what was guiding the initiates to the higher mysteries. Now, the release of this prison that we call the flesh or the body is done through, so Mark, be ready, I hope you have a pen handy, humility, charity, chastity, gratitude, temperance, patience, and diligence. And that's how you can awaken your soul and be guided by your soul, because the greatest light is the light that you have inside of you. It's like a lighthouse. And so it lights everybody to find the way to you and helps you find the way out of darkness. Plutarch's description to his experience as being an initiate. He says, it's a long journey with lots of detour in the darkness. So similar to a labyrinth, until the fright is at its highest, until finally the bright light comes. And that makes allusion to the labyrinth, the journey of the myth. And then, like Theseus, he defeats the Minotaur. The Minotaur is your ego. So it's the monster that's inside of you that you're afraid of. And meanwhile, you're the one who created the Minotaur. So you're the one who is able to then decreate it. It's a metaphoric description of the process of elimination or enlightenment and the quest for wisdom that is applied to your own life. Much like other areas we have explored, the rites are associated with ears of wheat. With the Toltecs, it's associated with corn. So it's always associated with agriculture. Why is that so important? Because with agricultural-based cultures, we build roots, houses, we become stable in our structures. And part of learning, going from a shamanic nomadic culture to an agricultural culture, we have very different change in our lives. In my experience in walking the Camino, I walked for 800 kilometers, and I experienced the synchronicity of life during that trip. Living in the moment, being one with my body, with my surroundings. And because you're walking and not taking a bus or a train or whatever, it's much slower. The pace is quieter. And you notice the butterfly. You notice when we crossed over from Spain, we noticed a bunch of snails everywhere. You're paying attention to the scenery that we're not used to doing anymore, or that we wouldn't do if we stopped traveling, if we were stuck inside of a house and just live our little sedentary life of agriculture. So it was a marvelous experience of the divine, because you really, in that slower pace, really try to get, you become connected with everything. That connectedness was very real. But at the same time, the continuous movement, we didn't know we were going to sleep that night. Yeah, we were going to sleep in an albergue, hopefully had a bed for us, but we weren't sure that the albergue that we were going to stop at was going to have enough beds for all of us. We might have to walk longer. We have no idea what to be expected. And one of the saying is that the Camino provides, and that's very true, because for every experiences that you needed to deal with a situation or to find the answers to the questions you were asking yourself, continuously were present. This is what synchronicity is about: being one with your energy, letting your and telling the universe, I have this question, and the answer comes, and you have gratitude, and then you're like, okay, so then with that answer, I have another question, and continuously this movement of beauty and answers in all the different landscapes of Spain. It was transformative experience. It's also a best way to get away with greed and with hoarding, because you're carrying everything on your back. So all of a sudden, you don't wear fancy pants. I didn't see the point. I mean, I was going to be hot. I was going to be sweaty. So everything was just a ponytail going off, and appreciating the water of the shower, to cleanse it all off, to be fresh, to be, you become grateful for the simplest things that we take for granted now. We take for granted the hot shower. We can have one whenever we want. But on the Camino, you don't know. You might get to a place and there's no hot water, and you'll still shower in the cold water because you need to wash, you need to clean. And we washed all our clothes by hand. So we kept it simple. The simplicity of this life is what made it so wonderful. So when I tell people simplify your life, I don't mean I mean everything. I mean your finances. I mean your closets. What are you packing? What do you have in your kitchen? Are you even using those things? Simplify it. Make it simple. When I decided to do this full time and I retired from my job, I had to simplify my finances, because I couldn't afford to spend a whole lot of money on a whole bunch of different things, because now I was reducing my income. And when I did that, I simplified my finances by asking myself, okay, I don't need a big car. I just need a car. I don't need expensive clothes. I just need decent clothes. And then we cleared away all of the expenses that were not required, not needed, that was superfluous, and we paid all the debts, we paid all the credit cards, and we started living within our budget. Well, that also eased the anxiety, it eased the stress, it eased that. And so every time you're making a change, the change is affecting you, raising your vibration and making life better for you. Exactly. So you have to take your experiences outside of your routine and ask yourself. After we came back, it was funny because in our backpack we had to change of clothes. That was it. So there was the dirty one that you wore, and then when you got to the albergue, we washed the clothes, put them to dry, and put the clean set on. And that's all we had. So we wore the same clothes, the same two set of clothes for over a month. So when we came home and we opened the closet, we were like, there's so much in there. I only need one pair of pants, one shirt, and what helped really thinning everything out is that once you walk for 800 kilometers, I guarantee you lose quite a bit of weight. So we got rid of everything that didn't fit anymore, and we started fresh, and we didn't refill it. We just kept it to where it was, and it was a feeling of lightness that came with that. Those are all the transformation that happen during the lesser and the higher mysteries. You have to understand these things. And then, because you're not so weighed down by your own concerns and your own worries, you're able to see people. You're able to connect with people. And the connections I've made on the Camino are still, and this was in 2017, to this day, very strong. We communicate regularly, and it's fantastic. So I invite you to if Mark was asking, what can I do, until you do publish this workbook. Well, these are the things you have to listen to the podcast and maybe re-listen to them a second time. Say, okay, oh, she recommends doing this, so she recommends doing that, right? The work that was done is learning about yourself, and you have to look at your fears, your pains, your hurt. You have to examine, do you have anger, anxiety, everything that you have a reaction to. You have to take a step back, go into witness, and ask yourself, wow, I reacted quite strongly to that. Why is that? What old pain is being triggered by what just happened that created my reaction of anger or anxiety or blowing up at someone? That's why it's the darker of the two mysteries. The lesser mysteries is the cleaning work, the examination of yourself. The lesser mystery is guided by one principle: know thyself and nothing in excess. Okay? Know thyself. So know who you are, know your pain, know your triggers, and do nothing in excess. You can try things. It's okay to try things, just don't do them in excess. In the higher mysteries, the initiates are required to develop this global connect to the global unconsciousness, the archetypes, which is where the study of the myth comes in. They were studying the myths with the sacred key after they were entering the higher mysteries. And they had to learn to act better, be more moral. I said that already. And this time, your guide, instead of being Apollo, your guide was Dionysus. And he said, become thyself, be thyself. And so it's not about knowing who you are. Now you know you're a divine being. Now it's about being this divine being. Actualizing this being, this divine energy into this world. The initiates were very respected. This was something that affected Greece, not just the one little small area. So the entire sanctuary was protected and was never no one ever attempted to seize it or attack it. Twice a year, there was a truce enforced all over Greece for candidates to travel safely to either become initiates or later return for more learning. And it was one of the most open schools as far as the mysteries, but only very few would be actually accepted into the higher degree. The only man who entered the sanctuary and was not initiated was the philosopher emperor Marcus Aurelius. And he said that he left richer than when he came. He absolutely said nothing else. He never spoke of what he lived, of what he seen, what he experienced. He was a Roman emperor from 161 to 180, and he ruled. He was one of the last ruler known as the Five Good Emperors. So he was a good man, and he ruled with wisdom, justice, courage, and moderation. So again, aligning his belief very closely to what was being taught there. Very good. So now, how can we defeat this sedentary life? So you have to go more in nature. You have to leave the indoors and go and venture more into outside. And it's not about being in constant movement, because I assure you, I walked for 8 hours in Camino. So yes, I was moving constantly, but I had 8 hours of it. If if you want to try it one day, try walking for 8 hours. You're going to see a lot of stuff. And then you realize, okay, so I've seen so much. Then you need time to sit and then put it all in order and organize it and see the meaning behind everything you've seen. So I suggest instead that you go into nature and that you sit and you observe it from their point of view. Always carry a journal with you. You never know when you're going to have an intuition and a message inspiring you. And then come back and ask yourself, what do I really need? What's really important for me? I think that in an effort to hide behind closed doors, which is where the closets are in, yes, we are doing ourselves a disfavor. It's very important that we air everything out. And so as we have a place, as we have, because we're sedentary, we accumulate more, we hoard more. But if we look back at the Greeks, because they weren't traveling, well, all of a sudden their limited resources are to where they decided to settle. And so that's when they started feeling fear. Oh, am I going to have enough? And then they were like, oh, but I'm safe, so I want to stay here. So fear was also getting in the way. So sedentary created in the human many of the ego-based feelings and emotions. So in the end, humans develop kind of a laziness or a dependency, and they fall prey to those traps of the material dimension. Sedentary gives us the false sense of security because we think, oh, if I close all the door, I'm safe. And it's the opposite of the mystery school. We need to open everything. We need to examine everything. And we need to be honest with what we find. You're perfect. And you deserve to be loved, appreciated, and respected. If you recognize that maybe some of your behavior wasn't great and you should have acted differently, there's always a chance for you to ask for forgiveness. There's always a chance for you to apologize. There's great growth that comes from recognizing our own mistakes, our own error, and honestly, from the heart, apologizing for something. If you think it's too late, or that you can't contact this person anymore, or there might be some dangers involved in doing so, at the very least, you can go inside of your heart and still apologize, and you can still do the work. All right. So it's for everyone. And the Greeks recognized this, that it didn't matter if you were a man or a woman, or if you were a free man or a slave. As long as you spoke Greek, you were able to attend. Now, don't think that this is much of a racism thing. And this is just that I can experience this. I can teach in French and English and Spanish. And although I understand other languages, I couldn't be able to teach in them because there's too many terms that I wouldn't know how to explain them. So when people come to my classes, I ask that if I'm teaching in English, that they at least understand English, or if I'm teaching in French, that they at least have the ability to understand that language, because otherwise it gets too complicated. And you can't be explaining something and then have someone translate and expect it to take the same time, because it simply doesn't. So if I usually take a weekend to teach something, and now someone is translating everything I'm saying, well, how can I possibly cover the same amount of ground and same amount of teaching? It just can't be done. And I think that's the only reason why they were wanting people to speak Greek, is just for the flow of things. the mystery school was really about a better life for the individual, and it was based on the individual practice. Next week, as we're exploring the Eastern monasteries, Orthodox monasteries, we are going to delve deeply into that. What is that individual practice? What does that look like, right? And the Greek mysteries and their gods were, although adopted by the Romans, they lost their spirituality and their meaning. So that's very sad. Now, right, I'm covering things. That's good because we've got 20 minutes left. The temples, the sacred place all over Greece. So I'm going to quickly name a few and explain what was there. So if you ever get a chance to go to Greece, this would be really cool. Epidaurus is an area where the temple of Asclepios, the son of Apollo, was officiating from. It was a healing temple. Apollo was a healer. He gifted Asclepios with the caduceus, which is the two snakes, symbol of medicines. Remember that snakes are not bad. Snakes are not scary. Snakes are wisdom. Snakes is energy, transformation, revival. As they shed their skin, the new skin comes out. The whole process of clearing out the old for a bigger growth into the new. So it was a sleep near or around or inside the temple and receive in their dreams the best cure for their disease. And as they would apply these cures, they would then give thanks. So there's a lot of signs, if you will, engraved rocks and things like that, saying thank you and describing the cure that they received for their illness and how they healed themselves. It was a great site of pilgrimage. And inside the temple, the archaeologists are unable to determine why certain things exist. So they can only fathom that it's part of the religious practice. So this is interesting because it's a healing temple, but they identify things from Apollo temple that are reproduced there at Epidaurus. So Apollo is linked to all of these. So if you ever do a tour of Greece, I would encourage you to do a tour of Apollo sites. So you might get some, I don't know, intuition, knowledge, something that get downloaded to you. It's one of the trips that we will be taking. The next one we're doing is in Ireland, but eventually we'll make our way to Greece, and this will be the journey. We'll visit all of the Apollo sites in order to hopefully receive and gain wisdom and knowledge from all of these sites. Delos is the most important religious site because it is said that it's where Apollo was born. It's been in use since 3,000 years before Jesus. So that's 5,000 years old that the site has been a site recognized for Apollo's birth. This small little island is like a rock place. It doesn't have any water to it. So the only way to get water is collected from the rain. So technically not a very welcoming place, but energetically is apparently amazing. On this particular island, there's a lot of swans and goose that live there, and they're considered sacred, much like the cow in India. And so you can't harm the goose and the swan because it is said that if you do so, you will harm Apollo himself. The temple also commemorates the ability of Apollo to heal. So the first one is his son's ability to heal, and this one is his birth, but there's also healing taking place there. The other big important sites related to Apollo is Delphi, so the oracle sites, and Bassae. Bassae is a third of the site of Delphi, but exactly the same as Delphi. The temples had oracles. These oracles would sit on a high chair over a round circles. They're said to be vapors that would influence the oracle and affect her ability and put her into a trance-like stance. And then you could ask questions and she'd give you answers. The Greeks also believed that you could communicate with the dead, and that would be in Ephira. So when you communicated at Delphi, you communicated with the gods. So your higher self with your soul, and maybe even directly with Creator. But if you needed to contact or connect with the past life people, then that was done through the Ephira temple. Again, all of these temples are to connect the learning and the evolution of an initiate, just like in Egypt. So it's not like you could go to Delphi and learn everything you need to know there. You needed to travel to all these different places. So although they establish a sedentary life, they still, in their shamanic belief, their cultural, spiritual belief, needed to walk, needed to travel. The growth from, the saying is travel forms the youth. Well, that's exactly what it is. They believe that through these travel, they would be put in situation that they wouldn't encounter at home and really apply what they were trying to learn and what they were trying to put together. We talked about that already. Now, the myths are not always organized in a real order. So it's not like they say story one, story two. That what they did is they collected all the stories of the myths and they put them in a book, and they hope that it's going to make sense to you. Yes. For the similarities between the Odynic mysteries and the Greek mysteries, Odin and Zeus both have 12 deities accompanying them, which is really interesting. They're both situated on a mountain. They both travel through. I'll answer that in a second. The both require the initiation to pass through two doors, the one leading to darkness, the one leading to the light. Even Zarathustra has the two doors as part of the initiation. I think it's important that I remind you of these things because you need to see the connection between all these different mystery schools and all these shamanic practices around the world so that you realize how we are all closely connected. We're all too often prone to look at our differences, and you have to start looking instead at what is the same, what unites us. When you're analyzing the Greece myths, it's really, really hard if you don't have the proper references because some of them will just tell you the story for the story. Sometimes in one of the books that I've read, they will tell you, okay, so this is the story. However, this is what it means. Let's pause here and see what the meaning of it is. I'll try to find an example. It talks about the story of Niobe, where the story of Niobe, the allegory is that Niobe, the mother, represents the winter. She's vain and she says that she's better than the mother of Apollo, because Apollo's mom only had 2 kids and she has 14, and so she's vain and she says she's better. And in the story, she gets changed into stone, and the statue is placed near where there's running water, and it is said that the stone statue will keep crying and crying, and that's what makes rivers and stuff. Now, the story means that she represents winter. She's hard, cold, and proud, like the stone that she's transformed into. Until Apollo's arrows. Remember, Apollo is the sun. So the sun shining on winter, what happens? The snow melts, the ice melts. And that's what happens. The tears are the emblem that nature thaws itself and spring is coming. And winter's pride has melted. So that's one of the ways. Some of the books will explain those to you, but not all of them do. Also, in one of the books that I was reading, it's the Greek and the myths of Greece and Rome, which they include Bacchus in the transformation of the Roman Bacchus, and so you're missing the whole story of Dionysus, and they're not interchangeable if you're going through the new version of the myths for the Romans rather than going to the original Greek myths. So you have to be very careful if you're really interested in the myths. The Greeks myths have been deformed because of the Romans, so I would go into the Egyptian myths instead with Isis, Osiris. It's much easier to understand then. Okay, continuing, I was actually going to go into analyzing one or two myths here. So the one of Dionysus and the one of Orpheus. So maybe that will help. Orpheus is known as the Tracian Bard. He was the founder of theology. He was the institutor of the morals of the Greeks, the first prophet of the Greek, and also called the Prince of Poets. So he's starting to sound a lot like the Celts, right? The poets and the prophets and all of that. That's what the Druids are. He's the founder. So we're talking about thousands of years old here. He was the first one to teach the sacred rites and the mystery. So the mystery of the Elysian school comes from Orpheus. He's linked to the fountain of wisdom, much like Odin was linked to a fountain of wisdom. Some scholars say that he was influenced by Hindus and their belief system. He was initiated in the Egyptian mysteries, as well as the mysteries of Kaberi. And so that's where the link to Demeter and Persephone comes in, where he would have gotten his knowledge of music and medicine. So the myth says that he married Eurydice, and they lived very happy, but someone started making advances towards her, and she ran away from him. And when she did that, she got bit by a snake, trying to escape. Orpheus tries to go to hell to get his wife back because he really loves her and they're a beautiful couple. But he's told, you can walk, if you can walk all the way back without looking back, you can have her. And the curiosity, did she change while she was in hell and all that? And he turns around too soon and she gets yanked back and he can't have her. After the second loss of his wife, he goes around the world very, very depressed. He meets a group of women who are merry and want to dance, and he's a musician, and they ask him, please play music for us, and he can't because he's heartbroken. And they tear him to pieces. And they throw his head in the water, and his head continued to talk and call for Eurydice, and eventually his head gets stuck, and it keeps talking through the ages. It keeps spreading his message. And his lyre, the instrument of music they use, was put in as a constellation because the god said that they wanted to honor him. Now, what does that represent? Eurydice represents humanity who dies from the snake bite, the false knowledge, and is imprisoned in the underworld. The underworld is the ignorance, right? So we're stuck. We think we know things, but we really don't. Because if we really did, we'd know that we're light, that we're spiritual, that, that's what I mean when I talk about true knowledge. So if you don't have that, then you're living in ignorance of your physical body and your senses. Orpheus fails to save her because he falsely estimates and mistrusts the human soul. He doesn't trust. And because he can't trust, he turns around. And that's when it gets lost to him. And he knows this. So he's beating himself up because it's his lack of trust and lack of faith that causes his loss. Now, the group of women are representing by the various ideas, ideology, religion that are trying to destroy the body of truth of Orpheus. Now, remember, Orpheus is what created the mystery school. So he knows the information. And by tearing him apart, they're trying to destroy him. They're trying to destroy his school, his mystery school. The head represents that truth cannot be silenced. And that's why the head keeps talking through the ages and keeps spreading the message. And even though they tried to stop it by destroying him. His music was the instrument by which his teachings of the seven divine truths are spread, because the lyre had 7 strings. So again, we're back to the number 7, which feels much better because it's 7 everywhere else. And we just had a few 9s here and there with Odin and with the Elysian Mysteries. And I explained this, right? Sometimes it's 1, but they divide it in 2. Don't know why they do that, but there's 7 key to universal knowledge. Those are the ones I shared earlier: the humility, the compassion, the love, and all that. So Orpheus is the equivalent of Balder in the Odin myth. He's one of the many immortals who sacrifice themselves so that mankind can have wisdom. Who else did that? Buddha did that. Jesus did that. There's ascended masters. Serapis Bey did that. They came. They dedicated their lives to teaching, and didn't always succeed. Didn't always go well. So they were often lost their lives. One of the very few that managed to live a long life was Buddha, but he's one of the very rare ones. Most of the time, because the teachings are creating an imbalance in the world, right? All of a sudden, everybody is trying to get us to buy stuff. That's what the media is doing. That's what the ads are doing. We're constantly bombarded everywhere. Buy this, buy that. You need this. Look at that. You're not perfect, so let's do this. Let's change. You need surgery. You need this. You need that. Right? It's constantly telling us you're not good enough, you're not perfect enough, and you need to spend more money. And it's a consummation world, right? Materialistic world. And these teachers come in and they're like, no, you're great, you're fantastic, I love you the way you are. And then all of a sudden you don't need any of that. And so people are afraid. Well, what is the economy going to look like if you stop buying? What is this going to happen? And oh my God, what am I going to have to do if you don't give me money for everything, right? And so they were throwing the world into this disarray that if everybody followed them, what were they going to do? They weren't ready to change. They weren't ready to transform. So it's because of that many of the wisdom teachers have been eliminated quite early on, because they created what appeared to be pure chaos. So Orpheus was declared the son of Apollo. So again, we have the link to Apollo, which explains why all the sacred sites are dedicated to Apollo. They're linked to Orpheus. And he is said to have reincarnated as a swan, which might be why it's forbidden to kill the swans in the goose near the Apollo temples. It's in homage to Orpheus and his sacrifice. Now, Dionysus. Dionysus, it has statues of Dionysus included on all the lesser mystery temples and all the professions and all the gatherings and the celebrations. So he plays a very important role. Here again, you have the male coming to do a transformation, a rebirth. Dionysus is a god. He's the son of Zeus and darkness. So that could be interpreted as Persephone, or it could be someone else, but we'll go with darkness. While he's looking at his own reflection in the mirror, he gets trapped into believing that the image in the mirror is him. And so eventually the giants who are alive at that point in time give chase to him and try to capture him. Dionysus tries to hide by changing shape, and he goes into ram, goat, bull, and he's finally trapped by the giants in the form of the bull. And the giants immerse him in a big cauldron of water, and then they roast him over the fire, and then they eat him. A friend of Dionysus rescues his heart, which is put inside of a temple, and Zeus, his father, gets angry and kills the giant with his lightning bolt, which burns them to ashes. And out of the ashes are molded the humans. And since the giants ate Dionysus, the humans are made with parts of Dionysus, right? Because all of the giants ate Dionysus. So inside all the giants was part of the god Dionysus. And because out of the ashes of the giant came human, we therefore have the essence of divinity in each and every one of us. So the meaning of this story is that Dionysus is the rational soul, and is self-aware, and that's why it's divine. When it's scattered through creation by being eaten by all the giant, it loses its consciousness, and it's oneness, right? Because it's split in all these different pieces between all the giants. The mirror that trapped him was the representation of the illusion. He thought what he saw was real, and he accepted that as himself. He thinks he's the image, but he forgot the fact that he's God himself. That was the trick behind the mirror. So the immersion by water is the purification, and the roasting by the fire is the cleansing. And that allowed him to ascend back to his spiritual form, not the physical form. That didn't matter. So he's immortal. He survived this. He just lost his shape. So as he survives, the rational soul is still alive because it's been purified from matter. And now the purpose of human in their existence is to preserve and release that rational soul back to the surface. Meanwhile, while we do this, we should be able to eventually have the sense of wholeness, that all of these divine little parts are all in each and every one of us, and therefore we are all one and connected. So that is very similar to the Egyptian mysteries. Osiris is dismembered and put back together, right? And the heart of Dionysus is the seat of his immortal soul, and that's why his soul survived intact, because the heart was remained intact. There we are. So Dionysus is not Bacchus in the sense that Bacchus is the Roman equivalent of the king of wine and orgies. And so Bacchus is about indulgence, excesses, and pleasure of the senses, whereas Dionysus is about us confronting and defeating our ego. I will leave you with this. Carl Jung said, "It is not a matter of indifference whether one calls something a mania or God. To serve a mania is detestable and undignified, but to serve God is full of meaning, and you are God." So, it was around 300 before Christ that don't leave yet. I had to close the podcast because the podcast only allows 9 minutes, but I have a few more things to say, so you get bonus on the videos. It was 300 before Christ that the state took over the control of the mystery school, and it was controlled by two families, Eumopedia and the Kerikis. And then when this happened, anyone could join as long as they didn't commit murder and were not a barbarian, meaning they spoke Greek. And it eventually died 400 after Jesus Christ because Theodosius destroyed all of those who did not embrace the Christian faith. Now, in conclusion, Plato said, when a man has devoted himself to the mystery, to bridge to the divine, and come to feel at home with it, at home with your own divinity, they suddenly arise, raise your vibration, as if kindled by a jumping spark, something like a fire in the soul. And that's where the fire is so important. It's part of the purification process. And from there, it continues to feed itself. So if you want to really examine something about the mysteries, I would actually say that you could try reading Socrates and Plato if you're interested in the Greeks. Again, not an easy read because it's written in Greek, it's translated. Every time something gets translated, leads to interpretation, so it's not always perfect. But nevertheless, the information is there if you're patient and you're willing to read and analyze. What you might find is what I found. Eventually, things start to link with each other, and you're like, oh, that's the same as this, and that's the same as that, and so it influenced now your comprehension of things, and you're like, oh, this is what it means, not really this. And because I speak 3 languages, I can honestly say sometimes it is lost in translation because the intent of what you're trying to say is wrongfully translated, and so you lose the intent. You just have a bunch of words. So if you really want to study and you're taking all this seriously, then you have to have as many sources as you can. You have to be spreading your net very wide. This has been for me a lifetime of studying, of reading, and of summarizing things and teaching it and making it accessible to everyone. So it's not impossible. It can be done. It just requires quite a bit of dedication. You can take advantage of these podcasts and videos because that helps you gather the knowledge without having to do as much work. So this is kind of more of a gift to you guys. But if this gets you really curious and you're really intending on working, then that's where I teach the classes. That's where I take on that's what spiritual coaching is about. That's when I guide you, and that's when we do the groups. Doesn't matter where you are. All the online groups are always in English. The next group session is going to be probably January. So if you're willing to work on yourself and you want to develop your skills and really find meaning to it all, then I encourage you to join one of those and participate, or use some of the material references that I keep giving you and just do the work on your own, or wait for the workbooks, and then we'll be able to do the exercise. The workbooks are going to be oriented towards individual work for people who are isolated, not enough money to travel, and being able to be connected to all of these places. So we'll have one based on the 13 chakras of the world. So each chakra is a different place in the world, and we're going to be connecting to the energy of those places and doing the work for that particular chakra. Another one is an empowerment workshop, finding your power, finding your purpose, finding your gifts. Another one is a consciousness workshop. What is consciousness? What are your pain? What are your hurts? Basically, the lesser mysteries is what this one is about. And so we're going to, through the consciousness workshop, we're anxiety, and we're doing the lesser mysteries. That's what that particular workshop is, that workbook is going to be about. Eventually, though, in order to attain the higher mysteries, it requires the help of a guide or a teacher. So it doesn't have to necessarily be me, but when the student is ready, they arrive at the finding the teacher. So don't lose faith and keep working on yourself. Keep reading, keep searching, keep answering, keep analyzing. Look in deep. Don't be afraid. There's nothing scary inside of us. It's the ego that makes us believe that if we peek behind the door, we'll be so scared. And what you'll find behind the door is your divine self. And with that, armed with that truth, then you can face just about anything in your life. So I'm just going to finish reading the comments and see if I answered all the questions for tonight. It's so nice to see you guys participate and ask questions. So I'm really happy with that. That makes it better. We used to have these live, which people could actually ask the question in the audience. It was a lot of fun. But so did I answer your question about what's the best way to come at all the myths? It requires you have to go back to the meaning of each of the gods. You have to keep that in mind, and you have to basically substitute their names for what they represent. So you substitute Zeus for sky, you substitute Apollo for sun. So that could be one way that you can start analyzing, and you really have to look. It's meant imagery. So yeah, for the most people, lesser mysteries is where you're at. If you're watching these videos, it's because you're looking for answers, you're looking for truth, you're searching for the answers. That's what the lesser mysteries are all about. You're at the place where you can finally start exploring yourself, start discovering who you truly are. That's the basic of the lesser mysteries. Because once you've completed the lesser mysteries, you've found your purpose, and you have no other choice but to embrace your purpose. And so that's, for me, is when I retired from my day job and I embark on this journey here. And I trust that the universe is going to look after me because I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And it's in that exercise of faith that I do all this. A lot of the people say that know me, they're like, well, wouldn't it be nice for you to get paid and you should monetize the podcast? And I'm like, in a way, this is nothing new, what I'm offering. I'm just summarizing for you. I'll get paid when I actually do the real work. When I assist you in your growth and when I assist you in your development, then I don't mind getting paid for that. But I'm offering these for free because I think that everybody needs to have this information, and it's everywhere. I just have the ability. I have a great photographic memory. I have the ability to make all these links and help you further find which is the door that you should open, that you should cross, that will make it easier for you to say, this actually resonates with me. This calls to me. This one I can work with. Personally, I find that working with the sacred feminine is my door. Um, in the mystery school, the Celtics, the Toltecs are easy for me to walk through. I did the Egyptian mystery. If I'm looking at what qualifies me as a lesser or higher, or where I'm initiated, in the description of everything, I can see where I'm at, and I can recognize the progress I've made, and this is why I can present these to you, right? So it's my pleasure. I enjoy doing these. I'm quite excited every time I do one of these. Oh, and by the way, next week we're talking about the Eastern Orthodox monasteries, and we're really going to explore into the personal individual work. That's what they were based on. So we're going to go and explore that. So maybe that'll answer some of your questions. That's a great way to start the work. Okay, that looks like I've answered all of the questions. So there we are, all the questions answered. I was a pleasure having you all tonight and having you join me. Please take care. And if you have any questions and you're watching this after the fact, don't hesitate. Just leave your comments. You need to subscribe to leave comments, but we're hoping to raise our numbers. Don't hesitate to share the videos with someone that you might think might enjoy this. Spread the word. It's free. So let's get as many people into the knowledge that they are divine being. The faster people will become aware of it, the better world we're going to live on. And that's going to make the whole difference. So, namaste to all of you. Good night.